Welcome to the Military Wire with Mike Schindler. This is the podcast where we interview America's most elite men and women who have served this country. We share their stories of overcoming, their proven lessons in leadership, and their journey to find a mission and purpose. And we have an exceptional guest today, a former Army Ranger, LRS, for those of you that don't know, that's long-range surveillance expert, who's equipping communities and individuals with the tools and training they need to be safe. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I want to put a shout out to the segment sponsor, Honest Talk International and Circle for Parents. Both these organizations have a vetted network of experts that are standing by to help our listeners navigate issues related to nutrition, fitness, parenting, relationships, intimacy. I encourage you guys to visit their sites at honestbirthtalk.com and circleforparents.com. And Circle for Parents is circle4parents.com. Scott Wealing, welcome to the show. You are CEO of Briggs Core Dynamics. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it, and it sounds like you're doing great things. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Listen, I'm doing great things because people like you are out there doing great things. And I want to give people a little bit of history on your background. You know, I remember growing up, my dad would say things like wisdom flows two ways, right? Which is one through mentorship and the other is through experience. And what I was so impressed about your background is you speak to both mentoring and experience. And I know you're not going to brag on yourself, so I'm going to do a little bit of bragging for you. I want to give the listeners a snapshot of your background. You served as an Army Ranger, so you went through Ranger School, so became long-range surveillance, 15 years military experience, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, and then multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, served as a contractor. Your military training includes Ranger, long-range surveillance leadership course, airborne, air assault, survival, tracking, counter-tracking, and drill sergeant. Holy smokes, how do you have time to do anything else?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was very fortunate when I was young in the military, and I always say I'm growing up in the military because that's really what I kind of did. I was a punk, you know, right out of high school, and I was lucky enough to have awesome mentors. In high school, as well as soon as I got in the military, I was taken under someone's wing that really, and I'll give a shout out to Courtney Cooper, because he was when I became a drill sergeant, at that time I was the youngest person to ever graduate drill sergeant school.
Is that right?
A lot of my privates that I had were older than me. So instead of like you normally take privates on Sundays to church, I'd take them to AA. It was kind of surreal. And they were older than me, but he was a great mentor, Courtney, and he really guided me through that, and I grew up a lot during that time.
So when you talk about mentorship, was this ingrained in you to look for somebody that had walked ahead of you on that path, or did your parents say, "Hey, listen, the best way to make alleviate a lot of mistakes is to find somebody that's gone before you"? I mean, what cued you into being a mentor or finding mentorship?
I grew up really far out in the country.
Yeah.
My family are farmers. My dad, my first mentor, I think everybody's father is their first mentor if they've got a good father, and he was phenomenal. If I could become half the man that he is, I'd be doing really good, and a great father. So that was first off, and then I just picked people I wanted to be like, and I've tried to tell my son the same thing. He just signed up option 40 Ranger contract.
Is that right?
Yep.
That's
he
cool.
leaves for basic training in June after he graduates high school. So I'm telling him the same thing, and it's kind of weird because there's a 12-week Ranger assessment and selection phase, RASP they call it.
Okay.
A workout, and I'm doing it with him as much as I can do because I'm not.
You're not the young buck anymore.
No,
right?
not a stud anymore.
Yeah.
So
and
it's probably the best time of my life mentoring my son like that. I'd never thought that I would be doing a 12-mile road march with my son, 45 pounds on his back, stuff like that, let alone teaching him how to stand in a position of attention.
Yeah.
He's going to have a leg up when he gets in, and I want to set him up for success. But
do they still require the 2 miles in 13 minutes? Is that still?
Oh, no. When I was in, I think the 2 mile time to max it was 11:47.
Oh, is that right?
I believe.
Wow.
Now it's like 13 something. So it's changed, but the whole physical fitness test has changed. Now they do a deadlift, they throw a ball and I think it's a weighted, medicine ball, and then they do some stretching, but they also do the push-ups and sit-ups, I believe. I'm not really up on the new one, but yeah.
But you're staying fit, and I know our audience can't see you, but you're fit. I mean, you're over 40 and you're fit.
Well, there's some structural damage. Yeah. And I tell people I was built cheap because I can't do what I used to be able to do.
Yeah.
But you do what you can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Listen, you've got some experience with explosive ordnance. After the military, I think this was pretty compelling too, that you served as a protected agent for Bremer during his ambassadorship in Iraq. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how did that assignment come about? I mean, here you go from one thing, you jump into this. You were handpicked? What happened there?
So I was 13 years Army guy, and then I wanted to go pararescue. So I switched over to the Air Force Reserves, and to the 305th Pararescue Unit out of Davis-Monthan, and I got injured in NDOC. So I went EOD, and right as I was finishing up my EOD school, I had a pararescue friend of mine that was working for Blackwater, and he gave him my name. They called me on a Sunday. I was there on Wednesday. The next Wednesday I was protecting Ambassador Bremer in Iraq. And most of us on the detail, we really didn't have motorcade experience, know how to drive in a motorcade, walking with a protectee or anything like that. So it was jam-packed week, and then they had a whiteboard on the plane going over, and they were telling us, how to drive. And
it was truly on-the-job training.
it was on-the-job training.
Figure it out in the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And every spare chance we got when he wasn't doing a move, and that guy, he worked 18 hours a day. He would do 2 hours on his stationary bike, and he would sleep for like 4 hours. He'd do it every day. So we were always on the move. But any spare moment we got, we would go down to, I'm sure all your audience have seen pictures of those cross swords that Saddam had in Baghdad. Yep. We'd go down there in this huge parking lot, and we would train and practice how to drive and everything. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve for sure.
Man, but that speaks to the training though. You had the discipline, you had the ability to think kind of outside the box and be ready to go for something that maybe you didn't know, right?
Yeah, you never know. And I always told people they pay me for two things. One, being away from my family. Yep. And two, what we might have to do. You're not training me to, just sit here when nothing's happening, or you're not paying me.
Yep.
So, that's kind of how I looked at it.
Man, I look at your background, Scott, and I don't want to belabor this, but I think it's important that people understand your background, your history, because this is going to speak to the question I'm going to ask you here shortly, which is what drives you. But you're now a qualified firearms instructor through the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. You train Secret Service agents, FBI agents, local law enforcement, special ops. It goes on and on. All ages, all skill levels. What you transition, sometimes we hear the stories about how our brothers and sisters struggle through transition.
Absolutely.
So how did you transition successfully? By all appearances, when I look and read your history, it looks like and sounds like a successful transition. So what was driving you to ensure that you had what appears to be a good transition?
The drive, I think, comes from the focus on my goals. And it really helped me transition by contracting, because I'm with guys, even though they're from every different service, to do what I did as a contractor, you had to have 6 years minimum special operations experience. So we had SEALs and MARSOC from the Marine Corps, PJs, combat controllers, and Green Berets and other Rangers, of course. So that was the easy part, And then when I got injured and had to have some surgery, so it kind of put me on a path where, all right, I need to make a decision on what I'm going to do. And luckily, I had a friend who was doing protection for people with too much money, pretty much. I'm not going to mention their names, but they're a very wealthy family, and I did that for a year. But I was contracting, so I would do 3 weeks with them. I was in Indiana for a week and a half with my now wife, and then in Arizona for a week and a half with my kids, and then I'd go back and do 3 weeks doing protection.
Yeah.
So it was constantly moving. I'm like, I can't do this forever. 3 weeks here, a week and a half here. It was crazy. And my wife, she reminded me that I had some property in Indiana, so I built this training facility out there, and I immediately went to the law enforcement. And it's always been a steady flow with law enforcement because they have minimum hours they have to train, right? Yeah. And that's worked well. The civilian side has been very good. Our kids' classes are phenomenal, and I enjoy training kids just as much as I enjoy with the SWAT team. Kids don't have an ego.
That's good.
They'll absorb and absorb and absorb. As long as there's that respect there and they respect you. People call me all the time. They go, hey, what's the minimum age? I go, I don't go by age. I've had 8-year-old girls that are more mature than 14-year-old boys in my class. Yeah. So we go off of the maturity level of the kids.
Yeah. But what it sounds like now is you're mentoring youth in some regards. I mean, all ages, of course, but again, following kind of in the footsteps that you followed is that mentorship model, and then essentially equipping people to really be better, safer in society. Is that right?
That's absolutely a good point. And I tell people, like people say, my wife, she doesn't like shooting. And I bring up when Senator Gabriella Gifford got shot. Yeah. The guy that took down the shooter was an elderly veteran who had a gun. He didn't draw the gun. He tackled the guy the shooter while he was doing a magazine change or a malfunction or something. I don't exactly remember. Yeah. So as long as you know how the gun works, you know when you can run, because fleeing is a viable option. There's people that are paid to go towards gunfire. Yeah, that's right. My daughter's not one. Yeah. Right? So if she knows, okay, he cannot shoot me because of the malfunction or the magazine change, it's a good time to take off. Yeah. So just the fact of knowing how that tool works, you're going to, set yourself up for success.
And I think that's an important point, is knowing, having a familiarity with it or an understanding of it, not to fear it, but to understand it. Yeah. And to your point is, you might not ever shoot one, but if you have an idea of how one works, then you will know what to do.
Just that minimum knowledge. Yeah. My traumatic wound care courses, which I think we give them a lot to teachers in schools, and then we supply them with medical gear and stuff like that. I've got I'll get to that in a minute, but just the bare basics of how a weapon works, I throw that in there in that class, because it's kind of a force multiplier. Sure. It really helps you out. Yeah. And I'm fortunate enough to have some businesses that I work with that it's kind of like a complete package. There's a business called Safe Haven Defense that I work with, and they put laminate on windows. Okay, the laminate goes on the inside of a window, so if there's a bad guy on the outside, he cannot shoot through. Right. And it'll stop up to 223, so it'll stop AR-15.
No kidding. Yeah.
But if there's a school resource officer on the inside or somebody who's armed, you can shoot through it and hit him.
It's brilliant.
It is.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's this, like Gore-Tex for bullets? It wicks the sweat away, but it doesn't let the rain in. But it's a very interesting product. We can put on vehicles. We did a Jeep, and we armored the entire Jeep, and it doesn't add any weight at all to the vehicle. So like a normal.
So is it transparent or is it opaque?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, ours is clearer than anybody else in the industry, I believe. Yeah. And like I said, it'll stop up to 223. Most people they don't do that much because it's usually handguns. Sure. In Rochester, Indiana, a month and a half ago, there was a guy. The school was on lockdown, and the guy shot the window because the door is made out of glass, and he went right in the school. That would have never happened if they had this product. So that's one of the products that I'm really pushing towards school corporations. I've I've talked to the Indiana Sheriff's Association about it, and I'm trying to get it out there into schools. At minimum, on the front entrance, the side entrances, we have smash proof where a bullet will go through it, but somebody can beat on it for a half an hour with a baseball bat and not get in.
Yeah, see, this is so important. I mean, and for schools to have this, for even conference room, I mean, it just makes total sense. You know, I want to switch this conversation up a little bit because I follow you on social media. You like to have fun. You're patriotic. I love that. But you're doing this How to American, and it caught my attention because I'm like, what is this? How to American? And I don't necessarily want to go down political rabbit trails or anything, but talk to us about the motivation behind these posts, like How to American. Why is that something that you're focused on right now?
So I started this January 1st, and so today is day 23 on How to American. And where it came about is a friend of mine moved to Europe, and the country that they live in, it's a socialist system pretty much. And she said, I'll never move back to the United States because, you know, I like the socialist. I'm like, whoa, yeah. I think you forgot How to American. And that's where the idea came from, and then it kind of blossomed into getting quotes from the founding fathers and putting them on there, and then of course Facebook put me in jail.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And CRTV, Conservative Review Television.
Yeah.
I've done some stuff with them, and they posted it, so 87,000 people just instantly got it, and then it kind of went, I don't know if I'd say viral, but it's been, I've got a lot of positive feedback from it.
So talk to us a little bit about what does it really mean to be American? I mean, that it seems like we've, and I'm gonna digress a little bit. And Scott, if you're not comfortable answering, it's totally fine. No. But it seems that we become more the I generation, right? I mean, society isn't so much like the one thing I appreciated about the Navy was it really was one team, one fight. I could disagree with your face, but you know, you always knew I had your back. Same went, you know, the other way. It was always reciprocated. And it seems now that everybody's like their own individual country in and of themselves. Like,
right.
If I disagree with you, then you're 100% wrong, and we're not friends anymore. Right. So when you say American, what do you mean by that? What point do you want people to get?
You know, I'm big on liberty, and I always think of that. It was a cartoon thing years ago where there's a thumb pushing down on a guy, and the hand it had on it government, and the guy was the normal American guy. And that's what we don't want. I want to be free to do what I want to do. First Amendment's huge. I mean, we couldn't do this probably without it. And long-form discussion like this is the way to go. You're right. People lock down there into this identity politics, and it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because their whole identity is wrapped around politics. I'm not political. Actually, I've got some gripes with both sides.
Sure.
And just when I'm saying how to American or being American, you know, we need to get back to the basics.
Yeah.
And respecting each other, having some decency towards your fellow man or human, and being able to work through problems. If everybody could work through problems, we wouldn't need attorneys.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, all of my ex-wives would probably agree.
Right.
You know, we just wouldn't need attorneys. If I could come to you and say, hey, I know that you have this issue.
Yeah.
We can still shake hands and talk through it, maybe, you know. And not only, you may not, or I may not bring you over to my side, but at least you can accept the reasons why I have my beliefs, and I can accept the reasons why you have your beliefs, and I can respect that.
That's right.
And that's what it's, you know, boils down to.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think it's so important. I mean, I love the fact that you do, you know, gun safety and firearm safety, and that's critical and important. You know, because there will always be bad people in the world, right? And that will always be necessary. So I also love the point that you're making about being able to talk through situations. I remember, you remember this, I'm sure. Years ago, the whole Win the Hearts and Minds campaign, remember? And people thought that was a soft campaign. And soft meaning soft,
right.
like squishy,
right.
like, man, I can't believe we're not going over and kicking some tail. And I thought, man, that's the most difficult campaign there is. I mean, you think about if we in America today had that same philosophy. Listen, our goal is to win the hearts and minds of our neighbors.
Right.
Right. That's a difficult assignment today.
Absolutely.
That's like an embrace the suck assignment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I've never equated it with the hearts and minds mentality, but you're right.
Yeah, I mean, so what did you learn through all your experiences, which, the audience is clear on what your background is, pretty impressive. We know that your training saved lives, but what did you learn in and from your experience in the military, working, security detail, private detail? How did that shape you to run the company that you're running now?
I ran a company. There's a lot that goes into it, of course, but as long as I have a goal and a focus, and I don't take myself too serious, and I tell people that right when I start training. Hey, I don't take myself serious, but I take what we're doing serious. Okay, I've got a pretty thick skin. You can give it to me, and I can give it back, and we can have a good time while we're learning.
Yep.
Or, so the focus on that, having fun, doing it, is really what drives me. Is I like shooting. I like teaching kids. I like teaching adults. I've always liked that, and I have no problem getting up in front of, a group and passing on what I've learned. And I'm not making any of this up. It's not like I invented this.
Right.
I'm passing on what was passed on to me from really good people. I've trained with some of the best in the world. I've worked with some of the best that were operated the whole thing. And it's that mentality, that operator mentality, where you can't have an ego. If you have an ego, you're limiting yourself because you're not wanting to learn. Somebody calls me up and says, hey, I want my wife to go through your class. I said, okay, why don't you join her? Oh, I've been shooting pheasants since I was a kid. You can't teach me anything. I'm just like, oh man. But people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's hard to, that's a tough nut to crack. But as long as there's a respect going back and forth, I love teaching their wives because they'll go home and they'll outshoot them. And they're like, oh, maybe there is something to this. I've had that happen several times. And then the wife comes back through the training with that person. So no ego.
Yeah.
Always keep your mind open.
Yeah.
Think outside the box.
Yeah.
Have a goal and work towards that goal. Even if it's minor steps, and you're going to fail.
Yeah. But it's
Absolutely.
failing forward, I think, is what you're talking about.
Learn from
never
it.
quit, right?
Right.
Just set the mission, never quit, and you're going to fail through it.
Yeah.
But get there. I think that's
a good way to put it. Fail through it.
Yeah, fail through it.
I think Tim Kennedy says fail fast, so you can
and
learn
fail
from
often,
it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I want to wrap this up, but what advice do you have for those, that one bit of advice, Scott, that you have for those that are transitioning now?
Keep your friends close. The friends that you had in the military, the friends that you had before the military, they're two totally different people. And especially if they both aren't, friends before and military. Don't be an elitist. Don't say, oh, they haven't gone through what I've gone through, so I don't even want to talk to them.
Yeah.
You have to open yourself up and really, that's another ego thing. Put that aside.
But you're talking about having a solid support network. Don't abandon your support
100%.
network. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's critical. How do people find you, Scott?
BriggsCoreDynamics.com or trainbcd.com. Is it okay to plug the companies I work with?
Absolutely.
So I'm the brand ambassador for Infidel Body Armor. It's a really good company owned by a really great guy, Chad Cooper. I've worked with Chad, and we've done a couple DVDs, kind of an instructional DVD, but with a plot.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Always have a good time with Chad. And then I'm with Desert Design Development. They've got some pretty good weapon platforms integrated suppressors, the whole deal. Another one that I like to plug is Liberty Arms Incorporated, and they supply all of the medical kits that we put in schools. And they're totally customizable, and they work really well. If you want an expandable baton in your med kit so you can break out glass so you can get the students out of the classroom, they'll throw one of those in there.
That's cool. From
tourniquets to expandable batons, just everything in between.
Man, Scott, thanks for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Man,
Thank you for having me. I admire you. You're doing great work out there. Keep doing it. And bravo, Zulu.
Thanks. I appreciate it.